Inside Angola Prison, sentenced to die inside. In the United States, there is a prison so large it has its own zip code. A prison built on the grounds of a former slave plantation. A prison where thousands of men wake up every morning knowing they will likely never leave alive. This is Louisiana State Penitentiary. Most people simply call it Angola. It is the largest maximum security prison in the United States, covering more than 18,000 acres of land, an area larger than Manhattan. But the most chilling statistic is not its size. It is this. For decades, a large percentage of the men sent here were serving life sentences without the possibility of parole. Inside Angola, that sentence has a nickname among inmates and prison staff alike. Sentenced to die inside. Because for many men who enter its gates, the only way they leave is in a coffin. Before we go deeper inside Angola, if you appreciate factual crime documentaries like this, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel Beyond the Bars. Your support helps us continue researching and sharing powerful real stories from prisons around the world. Now, let's step inside one of the most notorious prisons in American history. A prison the size of a city. Angola Prison sits in a remote part of West Feliciana Parish, about 135 miles northwest of New Orleans. The prison complex is bordered on three sides by the Mississippi River, creating a natural barrier that historically made escape extremely difficult. At more than 18,000 acres, Angola is not just a prison. It functions almost like a self-contained town. Inside its perimeter are dozens of prison housing units, staff housing, farms and agricultural fields, industrial work areas, a fire department, a radio station, a hospice program, and even a prison rodeo arena. At its peak population in recent decades, Angola housed more than 6,000 incarcerated men. Nearly three-quarters were serving life sentences, meaning most would spend the remainder of their lives behind these walls. Unlike many prisons where inmates serve a set number of years before release, Angola historically held a large population of men who would never return to society. For them, Angola was not a temporary stop. It was the final destination. The plantation before the prison. Long before it became a prison, this land had a very different history. In the early 1800s, the area was part of a massive plantation system. The land was used primarily to grow cotton and sugarcane, crops that required intense manual labor. The plantation itself was named Angola. Historians believe the name came from the African region of Angola, because many enslaved people brought to work on the plantation were believed to have been taken from that part of Africa. After the American Civil War, the plantation system in the American South began to collapse. But the land did not remain empty for long. By the late 19th century, the state of Louisiana began using the property for something else entirely. A prison farm. Instead of enslaved workers, the fields would now be worked by incarcerated men. One of the most brutal prisons in America. During much of the early 1900s, Angola developed a reputation as one of the most violent prisons in the United States. Former prisoners and historians have described conditions that were extremely harsh. Many inmates were forced to work long hours in the fields, often under armed supervision. These work crews became known as chain gangs. Prisoners planted crops, harvested vegetables, and maintained the vast farmland that surrounded the prison buildings. According to historical records, Angola during this era was often described as dangerous not only for prisoners, but for staff as well. Violence between inmates was common. Security systems were far more limited than those used in modern prisons. And oversight of prison operations was often minimal. Some historians have even referred to Angola during this period as the bloodiest prison in America. However, the exact number of violent incidents and deaths during early decades is difficult to confirm due to incomplete historical records. What is clear is that by the mid-20th century, Angola had become infamous across the United States for its brutal conditions. A sentence that never ends. For many inmates entering Angola today, the reality becomes clear almost immediately. Their sentence is not measured in years. It is measured in decades. Or even a lifetime. For most of its modern history, Angola held one of the highest populations of life-sentenced prisoners in the United States. Under Louisiana law for many years, people convicted of certain crimes, especially first-degree murder, could receive life imprisonment without parole. That meant the individual would spend the rest of their life incarcerated unless their conviction was overturned. They received executive clemency. Or laws changed. For the vast majority of inmates, none of those things ever happened. And over time, a grim reality developed. Men would enter Angola in their 20s or 30s. Grow old inside its prison blocks. And eventually die there. In fact, Angola even operates its own prison hospice program for inmates who are nearing the end of life. Because so many prisoners remain there until death. The farm that never closed. One of the most unique aspects of Angola Prison is something that has remained largely unchanged for more than a century. The prison still operates as a working farm. Thousands of acres of land are used to grow crops including corn, soybeans, wheat, vegetables. Inmates assigned to agricultural work crews spend hours outdoors maintaining these fields. According to the Louisiana Department of Public Safety and Corrections, these farming programs serve multiple purposes. They provide work opportunities for incarcerated individuals, food supplies for the prison system, operational support for prison industries. However, the program has also generated controversy. Some critics argue the system echoes the prison labor practices that existed in earlier eras. Supporters argue the work programs provide structure and job skills for incarcerated people. The debate continues today. Entering the gates. The road leading into Angola winds through farmland and dense Louisiana woods. Visitors often say the approach itself feels isolating. There are no cities nearby. No busy highways. Just miles of rural land before the prison gates appear. For the men being transported here for the first time, that journey often marks the final transition between the outside world and a life behind bars. Once inside, inmates are assigned to one of several prison housing units. Some units are maximum security cell blocks. Others are dormitory-style buildings. Each one is heavily monitored by correctional officers responsible for maintaining order among thousands of incarcerated individuals. But Angola is not just known for its size or its history. In the decades that followed, it would also become known for something else. Some of the longest prison sentences in America. And the stories of the men who received them. Arrival, classification, and a life sentence. The first day at Angola. For men arriving at Louisiana State Penitentiary, the first day begins with a process known as intake and classification. New prisoners typically arrive in transport buses from parish jails or other correctional facilities across Louisiana. Most are still wearing shackles on their wrists and ankles. Inside the reception center, correctional staff begin documenting every aspect of the inmate's identity. This includes fingerprinting, photographs, medical screening, psychological evaluation, review of criminal history and court documents. Officials also assess the inmate's security classification, which determines where he will be housed within the prison. The process is designed to evaluate potential risks, including violence, gang involvement, and escape history. For some inmates, Angola will be a temporary assignment before transfer to another facility. But for many others, especially those serving life sentences, this moment marks the beginning of a stay that could last the rest of their lives. Classification and housing units. Angola is divided into multiple housing units, each designed for different levels of security and supervision. These units range from dormitory-style buildings holding dozens of inmates. to high-security cell blocks where prisoners spend most of their time inside individual cells. Some units house inmates who have demonstrated stable behavior over time. Others are reserved for individuals considered high risk, including those with violent disciplinary histories. The classification system is continuously reviewed. An inmate's housing assignment may change depending on behavior, institutional conduct, and program participation. But regardless of the specific housing unit, the reality remains the same for many incarcerated men here. If their sentence is life without parole, there is no scheduled release date. No parole hearing waiting years down the line. No clear end point. Only time. Life without parole. Louisiana historically maintained some of the strictest sentencing laws in the United States. Under these laws, many individuals convicted of first-degree murder receive life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. In practical terms, that means the individual will remain incarcerated until death unless their conviction is overturned or clemency is granted. According to multiple criminal justice studies, Louisiana has long held one of the highest rates of life-sentenced prisoners in the country. And many of those prisoners are held at Angola. Over the decades, thousands of men have entered the prison knowing their sentence would likely last longer than their natural life. For some inmates, that reality begins to sink in slowly. Others say they understand it the moment they hear the sentence in court. Decades behind bars. One of the most striking aspects of Angola is the age of many prisoners. Because so many inmates are serving life sentences, a significant portion of the prison population has grown old behind bars. Men who entered Angola as young adults have spent 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, or more inside the facility. By the time they reach their 60s or 70s, many are still living in the same prison system that processed them decades earlier. Criminal justice researchers often point to Angola as an example of what long-term incarceration looks like in practice. An aging prison population requires increased medical care, mobility assistance, and specialized housing. Some inmates eventually require wheelchairs or assisted living support. But even as their physical health declines, their sentence remains unchanged. A prison hospice program. One of the most widely reported programs at Angola is its prison hospice program. Established in the late 1990s, the program provides end-of-life care for incarcerated men who are terminally ill. Unlike traditional hospice settings outside prison walls, Angola's program relies heavily on inmate volunteers. These volunteers receive specialized training and assist with tasks such as sitting with dying patients, helping with daily care, providing emotional support. According to reporting from NPR and other outlets, the hospice program has been recognized by medical professionals as a rare example of peer caregiving inside a prison environment. Many of the volunteers themselves are serving life sentences. Which means the men providing care for dying inmates may one day receive the same care themselves. For those living inside Angola with no possibility of release, the hospice program represents the final chapter of life behind bars. The men who never left. Not every inmate who dies at Angola is buried elsewhere. Some prisoners, particularly those without family or financial support, are buried in a cemetery located on prison grounds. The graves are marked with simple headstones, each one representing a man who spent the final years of his life inside Angola. In many cases, the burial ceremonies are attended by prison staff and fellow inmates. For prisoners serving life sentences, the existence of this cemetery carries a powerful message. It is a visible reminder that for many incarcerated men here, Angola truly is the last place they will ever live. Violence and reform. Angola's reputation for violence during the early 20th century eventually drew national scrutiny. Investigations, lawsuits, and criminal justice reforms gradually pushed the prison system to change. One of the most significant turning points occurred during the administration of Parole, who served as warden from 1995 to 2016. During this period, prison officials introduced a number of programs designed to reduce violence and improve institutional stability. These programs included educational opportunities, religious ministries, work training initiatives, conflict reduction efforts. Supporters of these reforms argued they helped lower violence within the prison population. Critics, however, raised concerns about certain policies and management decisions. As with many large correctional institutions, Angola's reforms remain the subject of debate among criminal justice experts. A prison community. Over time, Angola developed something that few prisons possess: a complex internal community. Because many prisoners remain here for decades, social structures form inside the facility. Inmates may spend years working in the same prison jobs. Others participate in educational programs, religious groups, or vocational training. Angola also hosts a seminary program operated in partnership with New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary, which trains incarcerated men to serve as ministers within the prison system. These programs are designed to create stability within a prison population serving extremely long sentences. For many inmates, daily routines become essential to maintaining mental stability over decades of incarceration. But even with these programs in place, the fundamental reality of Angola remains unchanged. Most of the men living here will never walk free again. A place known around the world. Over the years, Angola Prison has drawn attention from journalists, filmmakers, and criminal justice researchers around the world. Its unique combination of history, size, and sentencing structure has made it one of the most studied prisons in the United States. Numerous documentaries, books, and investigative reports have examined life inside Angola. Some focus on prison reform. Others explore the lives of inmates serving decades-long sentences. But one case connected to Angola would eventually become one of the most widely discussed prison stories in modern American history. It involved 3 inmates and decades of solitary confinement. They would later become known as the Angola Three. The Angola Three. Among the most widely discussed cases connected to Louisiana State Penitentiary is the story of 3 inmates later known as the Angola Three. The group consisted of Herman Wallace, Albert Woodfucks, Robert King. All 3 men were members of the Black Panther Party while incarcerated in the 1970s. They were accused of organizing prisoner activism and, in the cases of Wallace and Woodfucks, convicted in connection with the 1972 killing of prison guard Brent Miller. Following their convictions, Wallace and Woodfucks spent decades in solitary confinement. Human rights organizations later raised concerns about the length of their isolation, arguing that decades-long solitary confinement raised serious ethical and legal questions. Robert King was released in 2001 after his conviction was overturned. Herman Wallace was released in 2013 after a federal judge vacated his conviction. He died of cancer just days after leaving prison. Albert Woodfucks remained incarcerated until 2016, when he entered a plea agreement that led to his release after more than 4 decades in prison. The case attracted international attention and became part of a broader debate about solitary confinement in American prisons. Angola today. Today, Louisiana State Penitentiary continues to operate as one of the largest maximum security prisons in the United States. Thousands of incarcerated men still live within its perimeter. Many continue serving life sentences, although sentencing reforms in recent years have slightly expanded parole eligibility for some inmates who committed crimes as juveniles. Angola still operates its farms, work programs, educational initiatives, and medical facilities. It also continues to house an aging population of prisoners who have spent decades behind bars. For these men, Angola is more than just a prison. It has become the place where they will spend the majority, if not all, of their lives. Sentenced to die inside. For more than a century, Angola has stood as one of the most complex and controversial prisons in the United States. Its history stretches from plantation fields to one of the largest correctional institutions in the country. Thousands of men have passed through its gates. Some served their time and eventually left. But many others remained for decades. Growing older inside the same walls. Watching generations of inmates arrive after them. For those serving life without parole, Angola represents a sentence unlike most others. Not simply years behind bars. But an entire lifetime. A life lived almost entirely within prison walls. For them, Angola is not just a prison. It is where their story ends. Thank you for watching Beyond the Bars. If you found this documentary informative, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue sharing real, carefully researched stories from inside prisons around the world. And until the next story, stay curious.